I think at the time, especially, going back to my dad is somebody who is very, for lack of a better term, noble, somebody that has genuine good character, and he's kind. He's not going to mistreat people. He might hold views that people might think that, oh my gosh, he really thinks that? But he would never mistreat anybody or be, unkind. So I looked at my dad as because I think he essentially really wanted to be like Jesus, And so me wanting to be like my dad, I just appreciated that about him. And even today, he's very much, a real docile, laid back guy, real sweet. And him inspiring me, or maybe I should say the faith inspiring him to be in a certain way, also inspired me indirectly, I guess you could say. Because I think it's not so much the faith per se that is what inspired me, but the things that surround the faith. The theology that's involved, the stories within the Bible, that sort of thing. And I think it definitely inspired me growing up.
So, you were drawing. When did you make the transition to music?
Playing music and really wanting to learn songs came, I guess, when I was probably about 12 years old. I started hanging out with another guy who was also homeschooled. And we fancied ourselves as the cool homeschoolers because while the other homeschoolers, wore hand-me-downs, they looked like they were straight out of the 80s. Of course, this is like mid to late 90s, We actually looked like normal public school kids, And thanks to him, that friend, his name's Caleb, he started getting into music, particularly like punk music and ska at the time. And these were types of music I wasn't familiar with, and they most certainly weren't. My parents weren't familiar with them. Everything they understood about punk was like the Sex Pistols and that sort of thing. They didn't realize there was a whole industry within the Christian community that made music that sounded just like it did out in the secular realm. And so my friend was helping introduce me to this type of music, which I was like, wow, this is so much cooler than the stuff that I'm listening to now. And so I was probably about, I'm guessing, 12, 13. And at this point, he started becoming more interested in purchasing an instrument. And my mother played a little bit of guitar, and then she, like I said before, her family comes from, music. And like my grandfather played guitar. My uncle is a fantastic guitarist. So it got kind of that point where I think my parents really wanted to see what could he do with a guitar if we got him one. And so when I think it was 12 or 13, right around that time, I got an acoustic guitar. And shortly after that, my friend got an electric bass. And then shortly after that, I got an electric guitar, Epiphone Les Paul II, very low-end Les Paul. But it's just something to get me started out on. We started playing together, and that was pretty much where it started. So really my early teens, I had no real exposure to any kind of lessons or anything. It was more of like my parents saying, here, have fun, figure it out, And I did in some regards, but beyond that, when I meet somebody like Erik, his knowledge of music just fascinates me because he understands things in a way that I don't. And it's just being with him the last several months has made me understand things so much better than I did before.
And you and your friend, did you form a little band, or was it just the cool homeschooler dudes?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. We were probably too embarrassed to go play anywhere because it was just us, him on an electric bass, me on a cheap, electric guitar. We didn't have a drum or anything. We usually would put on tapes or something and play over that stuff. So it was mostly just goofing around together and trying to learn the real simplest tabs and things. But beyond that, that was really all it was.
Well, then you changed locations geographically. You moved to California in 2001?
Yes.
And you had a knee injury? Was that before you moved?
Yeah, and it's funny because as a homeschooler, I did senior and junior work, so I was able to graduate a year early, which was great. And then I had a knee injury, which made all that insignificant. I could have just done it normal and everything would have worked out normal anyway. My dad had accepted a position in California in 2000, And we actually stayed behind trying to sell out the house so that we could move back. And that took a year before we could finally sell our home. And in the meantime, while my dad was in California, we were here. We were still visiting with the friend that I played bass with and guitar with. And his mom would usually come over on Friday mornings. And so one morning, this was probably early 2001 or mid-2001, I was walking through the house and slipped on a mopped floor. Oh. And it broke. I broke my kneecap, tore all kind of ligaments. It was horrible. Yeah, it was awful. And then a few months after that, we made the trek from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in a van, going all the way up to San Jose, California, with my legs sprawled out and stretched out.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was not fun.
Yeah.
Having to learn crutches.
It's a long drive.
And I'm not a light guy. Let me say that. Crutches, a big guy in crutches, that's not a good combination, I gotta say.
And in a new environment. What was it like in San Jose?
Well, it's funny, coming from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, again, being a very conservative area, being very, we have our own type of culture here, And it's funny because here it's mostly, especially then, white and black. You might see some Hispanics or some Asians, but you usually have to go to like Lafayette or New Orleans or, certain areas to see that. When you go there, what fascinated me was that it was more segregated in the way that you have Milpitas, which is like known as the Asian area. And then you had like the area around like Santa Teresa High School, which was predominantly Hispanic. And then you had this area, and it was amazing because you'll drive through these towns and go to a Kmart and it's mostly Indians, walking around and be like, wow, this is like the Indian area.
Was it a culture shock?
Yeah, it was. In a way, it was like, wow, there's all kinds of different people I was never exposed to, all kinds of foods. So initially, it wasn't a bother. It was more just like, how do you react? How do you absorb these new cultures without sticking out like a sore thumb, And having a Southern accent, at least they thought I had a very thick Southern accent when I moved out there, which I probably a lot thicker then than it is now. I remember being asked, "Oh, you're from Louisiana? Did you ever meet Britney Spears?" Like Louisiana's this really tiny state, only a few people. Like, everybody knows one another in the entire state.
Yeah.
So moving from a really tiny, laid-back state like this and going to San Jose, where that city had 1 million people and they're running and gunning, the traffic's always bad. It was a culture shock. But I eventually really grew to love it there. So I had a good friend that really made it enjoyable.
Then what happened with you creatively? Were you still playing guitar?
Yes, I was still playing guitar off and on, and again, once I injured my knee, I didn't really have anything else to do. So this kind of like gave me more opportunity to just sit with my guitar and then try to learn as much as I could from a more organic, not a very scholastic approach to learning guitar. So I would sit with tabs and try to learn songs in that way, or just write, try to write songs and write lyrics, because when your leg is stretched out and you can't really move around except to go to the restroom and stuff, you're kind of limited in what you can do.
What's a tab?
A tablature. It's kind of like the lesser man's music, like sheet music. The person, basically, it shows you exactly where to put your finger. Just very simple words. A lot of times when you look at sheet music, it looks like a completely different language, and it is. I mean, you really have to understand all the little notes and things, whereas tablature makes it simplified, but not quite as accurate. So that is a downside. So we call this just tabs for short. But that was, I still played music once I recovered, and I started going to church out there. I was a part of a youth group and played. I started singing, and then once I felt more comfortable, I started playing bass actually for them, and I think I played a little bit of guitar. So I mean, I always was playing music and involved, but that was really my first time involved with a organized band or group of people who were trying to perform in front of others, which was definitely a whole different experience in itself.
So you're performing in church. It's great. You get to perform the music you believe in, but now you got a car, and you got exposure to more radio stations. What happened then?
Yeah, at this point, prior to joining the church, so by this time I think I'd worked up a lot of confidence to play with people because I was exposing myself to other types of music. So actually, before joining this church, I had probably 2 years, maybe not even that much. I had gotten my first car, and it was an old car that was donated to a church that my dad was working at, and my dad was like, "Yeah, I'll take it. I have a son who could use a car if nobody else wants it." So they're like, "Yeah, you can have it." So he goes and gets it, and it was a car that was sat under this lady's tree for years. It was covered in sap, and you know, my dad opened in there, and he said he cranked it up as soon as he sat in and put the keys in. So he's like, "I'll take it." And it was a 1987 Fleetwood Cadillac. The thing was a boat.
Wow.
And it didn't have a CD player. I had to put a CD player in it. It's funny because you say CD now, and even that sounds old now.
Yeah.
But
was it a Discman or an actual CD player?
Yeah, it was an actual CD player. I went to Best Buy or something and got a Pioneer CD player and put it in there. And then
Did it have a tape deck at least?
What's that?
Did it have a tape deck?
I think so.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but I had to pull that out to put the CD player in. So then I didn't even have a tape deck. Yeah, but by that time I didn't have any more tapes. So
right. Yeah.
I'd moved on at that point. But, so having my own car, especially being raised as being very sheltered as I was, once I had my own car, then that gave me the power to listen to really anything I wanted to, whether it was Howard Stern. I remember listening to Howard Stern in the morning thinking, man, if my parents knew I was listening to this, they'd be...
Yeah, you felt bad, huh?
Yeah, I felt guilty listening to a lot of stuff. Not because I was bad, just because I was totally curious. Like, oh, what is all this about? But a part of the fun was listening to the radio and then hearing stuff for the first time. I mean, the first time I ever heard Tool, for example, the band Tool, I was in my car. I was probably 18 years old by the time I first heard Tool, and they had been out. They were out in the early 90s, late 80s, playing together. And when I remember hearing that, thinking, wow, this doesn't sound like something you'd hear in church. But it's awesome. And there were other, I would go to Best Buy when they had, aisles and aisles of CDs, and I would go through and pick out whether it was the Steve Miller Band or Pink Floyd, all the greats, and just started catching up. And there's still so much I haven't even caught up on. I missed out on so much, but that was... a car gives you a lot of freedom, that's for sure. And I definitely use it to my advantage.
Could you play the music at home, or was it only in the car?
It was only in the car. But I'll say now, my parents have changed to where now they listen to whatever they want. So I don't know if it was me. It took me kind of breaking down those barriers to be like, because I did get to the point where I was like, yeah, I'll listen to whatever I want.
You got a little bit more gold.
Yeah. And it's funny because now they're not anything close to how they were when I was raised. So my younger brothers got it so much easier, and my little sister was even easier than they got it.
You're like that old man. You're like, back in the day, I had to pirate my...
So many times I told my little brothers, like, man, you enjoy what you have. I had stuff thrown away.
I was 18 before I got to hear it.
Yeah, right.
And then when was it that you moved back to Louisiana?
Well, the economy started going bad shortly after 2005, 2006 in California. That's because my dad got laid off of his job. He was at a predominantly Chinese church, and a lot of people were going back to Taiwan. I should say Taiwanese because they did not like China.
Yeah.
So they were going back to Taiwan, and so a lot of the people that were there weren't there anymore to support my dad, and it got to the point where he had to come back home. Well, I still had friends. I still was in college and still had a job, and I was like, maybe this is where I make my way, where I stay out here on my own and my family comes back to Louisiana. And it didn't take long for me to be, a couple thousand miles away from my family and especially my brothers, and not seeing them, it was really tough. And so they left it was August 2006 to come back home, and then I came